is Making Stitches, and this time Kat Molesworth shares her love of quilting, alongside photography, blogging, podcasting and live events. She says her recent transition from journeyman quilter to master quilter with the Quilters Guild was a wonderful experience.
It has been so transformational for all of us, and many people have made lifelong friendships. And one of the nicest things was I think the youngest person who's ever done the course, which I love to brag about. But one of the really nice things is that you were in workshops with people who spanned the generations. So you had people who had huge amounts of experience and expertise, who you could aspire to be like. And at the end, you could see everybody's different styles, everybody's different interests in their quilts. There were very few quilts that even looked similar in style when you looked at all the master quilts. So it was absolutely wonderful, and I would recommend anyone to do it if they are serious about quilting.
Hello and welcome to Making Stitches. My name's Lindsay. I've loved crafts and creativity since I was a child. As an adult, I started a career in journalism where I discovered my love of people stories too. Making Stitches podcast gives me the chance to speak to creative people about their lives and crafts and then share them with you. This time my guest is Kat Molesworth, the creative force behind the Blogtacular Podcast and Festival. With Blogtacular, Kat helped countless makers and creatives find their voice and community online. These days, Kat programmes workshops and talks for knitters, crocheters, sewists and quilters for immediate live events, the Knit and Stitch Show, the Stitch Festival and the Festival of Quilts. Kat herself has been quilting for many years, and this summer she graduated with a Master Quilter diploma from the Quilters Guild. It was fantastic to be able to chat to Kat after being a regular listener to her Blogtacular podcast in the past, and I loved hearing about her quilting experience. Here's our chat now. First of all, Kat, thank you so much for saying yes to being on Making Stitches podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Kat, can I just ask you, were you creative as a child?
Well, I was creative, but I was not talented. So it was a very hard struggle. I don't know if anyone listening has heard Ira Glass's discussion on the gap. I highly recommend going to listen to it because it gives you a lot of reassurance. But essentially, the principle is that if you have great taste, when you start making things, you don't meet that level of ability, and the gap between those two things is painful, and you have to keep working to close the gap. So that is where I was as a child.
Wow. You found a career in photography though, didn't you? And videography as well. Was that your creative outlet then?
Yeah, I mean, from when I was a child, I was really, really interested in photography. I think I took my first photo of a gaggle of ducks at a castle in Wales, on a proper SLR, focusing it myself when I was about 6 or 7. And I had been dying to get my hands on cameras before that. So my dad and my grandfather were both very keen photographers, and I very much followed them into that. So the kind of photography I like is photos that capture the reality of life. So not necessarily just the high days, but the everyday. And I really enjoy just a lot of realism. So I'm not doing anything that's particularly pushing the envelope, but I really enjoy capturing people, capturing them as they are in a moment, and also documenting life through time. But I don't get to take photos as much as I used to anymore. So I need to get back on Instagram and really start taking photos again.
Well, I think I probably found you through Instagram initially because you were very active on that and sort of holding this community of bloggers together with Blogtacular. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your blogging and your internet adventure, really?
Wow, gosh, my internet history. I have been a menace on the internet since last century. I started out writing fanzines and found that in the late 90s, people were moving online. So I tried my hand at that. Nobody read it, but I had fun writing it. And I used to go to an internet cafe in Golders Green, where I lived in London, and spend hours in the evening trying to get this website to work. It really didn't. So skip forward a decade or so, and I was at home with a new baby, and every day when she slept, I would go through a list of blogs that I had and visit every single one to see if they've updated in the last 24 hours. And I just loved reading stories about people's lives, seeing into their homes and their families. And I started blogging in 2007. And I haven't really looked back. I worked for Bambino Goodies, which was a site where parents who hadn't lost their taste went to find beautiful items for their babies. And we would spend all of our time scouring the internet for the latest fashions and items in that category, which I absolutely loved. I wrote my own blog, Housewife Confidential, which you can still visit, but I haven't bought a security certificate for it. So sorry, your browser will tell you not to go there. And I used to share recipes and sort of like little stories from our lives. As the children grew up, I kind of stopped sharing there because once they had the ability to give and remove consent, all consents were removed, and that's absolutely fair. They were quite internet safety conscious. They absolutely hate it when I go and meet friends off the internet because they have been taught through school that you should never meet people on the internet, which is unfortunately how I met their father. So it's worked out for me so far. And then in 2013, I was running an online film and photography school called Capturing Childhood. And we decided to also create an event for bloggers and online creatives, people whose work was on the internet, called Blogtacular. It was a very limiting name. I wouldn't recommend pinning your colours to the mast quite so closely because also people called it Blogtastic all the time, which drove me nuts. But basically it was an event for people who were quite creative, were looking to expand what they did and to grow both creatively and in their business. And each year we would hold a conference and put just wonderful speakers on stage. I'm like so privileged with everyone who chose to work with us, from our keynotes to the people who ran our workshops and our photo walks. Like every single one of them was so talented, and it's honestly they and the audience who made the event. I remember at the end of the first event almost crying because it had been such a lovely atmosphere. It was so congenial. It was so friendly. People were so open. And, you in any situation, you're going to get the odd person who it wasn't for them. They didn't enjoy it. And I'm sure that happened. And I, saw comments from here and there. But generally, the overarching feeling that I came away with was that people were so excited to be together. It was just, a few hundred people at the beginning, and it just grew into a lovely community. I still have people who made friends at Blogtacular who tell me like we've been friends since we met at whichever conference they went to, and that means everything. Like seeing people succeed, seeing people creatively fulfilled, and seeing them make connections is just all you can really ask for in your life.
Absolutely. Well, I guess very much like podcasting, blogging is a very solitary activity, isn't it? But then when you meet people who are passionate about doing it as well, you have that connection immediately, regardless of what niche they're blogging about or podcasting about. So having experienced it myself in a podcast group locally, it's incredible really, because you can attract such a diverse audience of people who all have this one nugget in common, and it's gold.
Yeah. And I just think live and in-person events are so impactful. Like I'm not going to lie, I love being on the internet. I love in long distance friends. I have friends who I've known for decades who I have never met. And one of them was sat 2 rows behind me at a concert, and we still didn't meet each other. We only realised when we saw each other's photos later. But, you know, I do think in person has so much more of an impact. And, you know, for podcasters especially, I think everybody listening spends so much time with you. Like, you know, they look forward to when your episode is coming out. They look forward to the conversation you're going to have with your guests. And you don't get that from a quick post on Instagram. You don't get that from a blog. Like, you know, there are some bloggers I did spend hours and hours reading as I went back through their archives. But once you're up to date, you know, it will take you 20 minutes at the most to read a blog post. Podcasters and podcast listeners, I think, have one of the nicest connections on the internet.
Yeah, it's very intimate being in somebody's ears, you know, and the fact that somebody's chosen to allow you to speak to them is wonderful, really. Now, you're not dealing with blogging and podcasting in quite the same way these days, but you are connected to knitting, stitching, crocheting, quilting and all sorts of things through your current professional role, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. So after Blogtacular, I went to work for the International Women's Podcast Festival. So podcasters, women, know me well. And I did some work for a union's think tank. And then at the beginning of this year, one of my friends who knew I was looking for work sent me the job advert for the programme coordinator for the Knit and Stitch shows, the Stitch Festival, and my absolute favourite in the world, the Festival of Quilts. And I just knew that I wanted to do that role. And I was so excited when she showed that to me, and I was very, very fortunate in that I did actually get the job. So now I look after the workshops for all 3 of those shows.
I can only imagine the workload that's involved in that.
It's there are moments, but generally I really love organising systems. So I've spent this first year working out how I can streamline processes and use technology to make everybody's life easier. So hopefully, as I go into my second year in the spring, those processes will really start to support everybody. And, you know, I'll have made my mark through that alone because, you know, it's such a wonderful organisation. We've got brilliant teachers. My team are phenomenal. And it's just such a lovely place to work. And it supports so many independent businesses, from our teachers to our stand holders to the people who come on stage. You know, it's a real celebration of creative, independent business. And I love that. It's so nice to be working there.
Yeah, it must be incredible. And then to actually turn up to the festivals and see your work, all your months of preparation in action must be very satisfying.
It is. I've just had my first programme go out, which I did in collaboration with my predecessor. And then in the next couple of weeks, we've got the second and third Knit and Stitches for the autumn. And so it is really lovely to see that process, which began in March of this year, finally come to fruition. So, you know, we work a long way in advance. So, yeah, it's definitely a learning curve.
I can only imagine. Now, of course, the reason for me reaching out to you was because I saw on your Instagram that you'd recently become a Master Quilter. And certainly from the old days when I used to follow you and I watched your vlogs that you would do, and you would take us on a trip on your, you know, a week in the life of your family kind of thing, quilting didn't really feature at all there. Your love of colour and fashion and interiors and all things nature and everything was, but not quilting. So how did quilting come into your life?
I mean, well, I have actually been quilting for about 15 to 20 years now. The one behind me I made probably over a decade ago now, although it took me about 3 years to complete it because I was very, very lazy about doing the hand stitching across it. I think I probably didn't share much about it. I think in the beginning when I was trying to learn to quilt and made huge messes, I did blog about it. But on the vlog, I certainly never shared any quilts. But I think I remember reading somebody's blog post, and I think Anna Maria Horner, who actually designed the fabric in the quilt behind me, who's now Anna Maria Parry, one of my favourite fabric designers. She's like a really colourful maximalist. Her work's so distinctive and beautiful. She had recently brought out a new collection and they made a quilt with it. And I thought, oh, you could just do that. And so I made my first quilt at that point. And I was so naive, and I didn't quilt very heavily on it, and I didn't do a binding. I just turned the edges in on a knife edge. But that is a quilt I still love. I have it on my sofa still. It had to be mended recently, so it's got some lovely wonky hand stitching on it to secure the fabric. And I think it was just the inspiration of seeing the ability to take somebody's colourful work and create something for the home that really appealed to me. Now, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago that I decided I was going to be serious about quilting and quilt more often. So before that, I was probably only quilting 3 or 4 times a year, and often on a weekend with my very good friend Kelly, who comes to stay. This quilt behind me again is one that I made on one of those weekends, and I decided I was going to be serious about it. And then I was at the Festival of Quilts in 2023, and I saw a sign saying that there were spaces on the soon to begin second Master Quilter course, and I just thought, oh, that would be perfect. That would really channel my energies and make me think about what I'm doing in a more serious way. And so I joined that along with my friend, and we spent 18 months working through the diploma. It was very challenging in some ways, because you had to every single month produce a piece of work and produce the essay alongside that, and to make sure that you're working to the standard that they expected, which, when you have a lot of children and a full-time job, is potentially a little bit more than I had anticipated. So there were times when I think, the general quilt I produced was maybe not the best quilt that I could have produced at the time, but they all met the brief, and they're all part of that sort of transformation from what they call a journeyman quilter into a master quilter. And I do think that it was a really worthwhile process, and I really hope the Guild continue it, because it has been so transformational for all of us. And many people have made lifelong friendships, and one of the nicest things was I was, I think, the youngest person who's ever done the course, which I love to brag about. But one of the really nice things is that you were in workshops with people who spanned the generations. So you had people who had huge amounts of experience and expertise, who you could aspire to be like. And at the end, you could see everybody's different styles, everybody's different interests in their quilts. There were very few quilts that even looked similar in style when you looked at all the master quilts. So it was absolutely wonderful, and I would recommend anyone to do it if they are serious about quilting.
Wow, that must have been quite an undertaking, really. I mean, for so many people, craft is a hobby that's bolted on at the side when they can squeeze it in around life and work and everything. But to undertake such an intensive qualification, to have to produce work every month, that must have been quite a juggle.
It was. I mean, in fairness, most of the journal quilts were A3 sized, so they weren't huge, but they still take time, they still take planning. And for me, the essay writing and being disciplined about that was one of the harder parts. Also, I spent a huge amount of time reading. I have currently more than 300 quilt books, I think. And it was a great excuse to go into my quilt library each month and pull out books that had relevant writing information, tutorials on the subject. So I'd often have 20 books in my reference section because I had spent a lot of time reading.
Oh, well, you had a great library then to dip into to support your studies. What would you say, what's your favourite kind of quilt to make? Do you have a go-to kind of...
So I think in my heart, I really love improv quilting. I like the freedom of not having to plan and not having to draw and calculate some of that. I mean, it's not like I can't do it, but it's not where I have the most enjoyment. And I really like starting to make small pieces and then bringing them together and seeing what they need to have added to them to make them cohesive. So I did a really large quilt for my best friend's 40th birthday a few years ago. And I think that's the point where I decided I was going to be serious about quilting, because it's a work of art. She has it hanging on her wall in her home. It is beautiful. It really, to me, it has all of her colours in it, all the colours that make me think of her. And it was an abstract design about books and swimming, because those are her favourite things. And I loved making that, and I really enjoy improv quilting. So my master quilt final was an improv piece curved quilt, which I then set into a background using reverse applique in a circle. So it was actually quite restrained as a quilt. And then I did some very wild quilting, some of which went a little bit lumpy, but I got away with it. So I think improv is definitely my style, sort of modern and improv quilts. I really, really enjoy them, but I love making traditional quilts as well. I've just started a grandmother's garden, or grandmother's flower garden, hexagonal English paper piece and quilt. I have a Riley Blake, Jane Austen block of the month quilt on the go, which is applique, although I'm still at the cutting and turning stage. But I very much think I will get through that by next year, so I keep up with the block of the months. And that's really enjoyable. That's a very traditional looking quilt. But I felt so moved when I saw Cindy Cloud, who is the founder of Riley Blake. She had the quilt at Chawton House, which is just down the road from us. And I saw it and I just thought, oh yeah, I really, really want to make that. And the fabrics that they've produced come from the Jane Austen coverlet. And, they have done all of this beautiful work on bringing that back to life. So I am varied in my quilt making, but yeah, definitely my heart is with the modern quilts.
Wow. Well, just with any crafts, I find with crochet, there are so many different techniques, there are so many colours, there are so many textures that you can never be bored. And also it's something that you're constantly learning, because everything that you do is slightly different, isn't it? Do you get, what do you personally get from being involved in the world of quilting? What gift has it given to you?
First of all, like brilliant friendships. I have friendships with people from all over the world that I've cherished over the last couple of decades, and many of them have come from quilting. And, every day quilters will see your work and show you appreciation for it, which I think is, just so lovely. I love people and I love quilters especially. But in terms of making, this might be bad to admit, I have never known what to do with my spare time. In fact, I was so bad at knowing what to do with my spare time that when I had moved out of home and had my first job, and I didn't really know how to spend evenings and weekends apart from watching telly, which is literally the best hobby ever, I got a second job because that just took up my time. And I think, as children have become less dependent and less time hungry, mine are now at the stage where my eldest has left home. My older two are very self-sufficient, so they don't have those high needs of the early years. It gives me something that I can do and something I can spend my time on. So it's a little bit about how my brain works, but I don't know how to have spare time, so I have to give myself extra work. And, I think in some respects, a lot of the businesses I've been involved in the past have been an expression of that. That I just want something to do. I like working, and if there's a focus, if there's a goal at the end of it, then you've got something to work towards.
Absolutely. When you're doing your own design rather than doing a block of the month or whatever, where do you get your inspiration from?
Oh, that's a good question. I think like my references are quite diverse, so it might be that I'm thinking about something from sci-fi that has spoken to me since like I was a little child and I saw it on a book cover, or I might be, at the summer exhibition, which is one of my favourite things to do every year, looking at how people have combined colours or how they're using shape and form. I really enjoy just soaking up ideas from places. Sometimes I'll have an idea for something really traditional, but with like a slightly wicked twist. That is a quilt that I can't tell you about, but I'm hoping to make. I can't tell you about it because in case somebody takes my idea and does it before me and better, because that's almost certainly going to happen because I'm very slow at getting around to doing things. But, I thought about a very traditional quilt format, and then I thought how you could sort of put something a little bit more cheeky into it and think about how that plays into the form. I'm kind of like a magpie. I like to get ideas from absolutely everywhere and anywhere. In the words of, was it Pablo Picasso, all art is theft, something like that. I probably quoted the wrong person, so feel free to write in and tell me where I've gone wrong there.
That sounds about right to me, to be honest. Quilting, obviously, to start with for you, was a very personal sort of domestic kind of thing, and then putting yourself through this course and having your work judged and graded by other people. What was that like, putting something that's so personal out there for people to basically judge and tell you what they think of it?
Well, I think if people know anything about me, it's that I absolutely can't take criticism in any form whatsoever. I also can't take compliments. So, equal opportunities. But yeah, I actually found that quite challenging because sometimes there would be very minor criticisms and I'd think, well, the whole thing was pointless. Why did I do that? When I'd still, like, the module was still passed, so it wasn't a problem because it's not one that you have to have like certain points on. It's just pass or fail. And if you fail, they would send it back to you and ask you to add the elements in or remake something, which I think a few people would have had to do at some point. I find that very challenging. And actually working at Festival of Quilts means I can no longer enter the quilt competition, which is great because it means I don't get any more judges' comments. So I can just go into the joy of sharing and, allow my quilts to be seen without the pressure of needing them to do well. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can totally identify with that. Oh, that's fantastic. Now, for anybody who might be listening to this who is, intrigued by quilting and wants to have a go, I mean, it does look very complicated, and to become a master quilter takes years of work to get there. But what would you say to somebody who's maybe thinking of getting involved? Is there an ideal gateway quilt to getting into it that's not too unmanageable?
I mean, honestly, just start is my best advice. There are some great simple blocks. So a simple 9-patch. If you look at strip piecing that, you can buy a jelly roll, which is pre-cut fabric, which is cut to 2.5 inches wide. So that would make you a 2-inch square 9-patch. Get a rotary cutter and a mat, protect your fingers, but they are really great ways to cut fabric, either freehand, as I do in my improv quilting, or with a ruler for more accuracy. But just start, just begin. It's great fun. Your first quilt can be rubbish. You don't have to buy expensive fabric. There's a great shop called Pound a Meter where you can buy quilting cottons from £1 a meter, which I have used when I've been practicing work. And I think, it's actually, quite useful to start off with something that you're not going to be precious about. My first quilt with the Anna Maria Horner fabric was not complicated in any way. It was just, I cut the pieces into rectangles and sewed them together, big rectangles. And, the quilt behind me is a sawtooth star quilt, but it is massive and it's been done using half square triangles rather than flying geese. Half square triangles are a lovely place to start. They are very easy and addictive to sew. And if you chain piece them, which means putting one piece of fabric through the machine and then putting the next one immediately through without cutting, so you just get a little tail in the middle, you can get through a whole heap of fabric in just an afternoon. But yeah, press your work. use best press to make sure things are nice and crispy, and just have fun, because, you know, quilting is about comfort, domesticity, but it's also about sewing like your heart and your love into something. You know, if you're making something to comfort somebody, to keep them warm, to decorate their house, all of that is, I think, you know, really admirable and enjoyable. And I love making gifts for people because you think about them and how they're going to enjoy it the whole time you're making it, which I think enhances anything you do.
Absolutely. When you're making a gift for somebody, there is love in every stitch, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, Kat, I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you about your creative journey and your quilting and everything. And I thank you very much for your time and wish you all the best for the upcoming shows.
Thank you. And anyone who would like to get into quilting and wants to come to Festival of Quilts, please get on our early access, because hopefully I will be booking a very exciting workshop programme, and we have some very special surprise guests coming this year. So if you're on the early access, you will be first to know and you'll be able to get tickets first.
That's marvellous. Thanks ever so much, Kat.
Lovely. So nice to talk to you, Lindsay.
Well, that was the brilliant Kat Molesworth, Master Quilter, events organiser and all-round inspiration. I loved hearing her story and hope you did too. My thanks again to Kat for taking the time to speak to me for Making Stitches. I've included links in the show notes to Kat's website and Instagram, as well as a link to the immediate live website where you can find all the details about the events which Kat looks after too. As always, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review or sharing it with someone who you think would enjoy listening. It really helps others discover Making Stitches podcast. And if you'd like to support my podcast making adventure, you could buy me a virtual coffee on my Ko-fi page or visit the Making Stitches shop on Etsy. I'll include links to both of those in the show notes too. Thanks again for listening. I'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with more creative chat for you. Until then though, do take care of yourself and enjoy your crafting.